Hey guys, I'm just going to go through a few of the errors that I keep seeing in the myth analysis papers so that you guys can go through and make sure that you don't make any of the same mistakes in your origin myths, okay? So let's get started here. One of the probably the biggest problem that I'm seeing is that there are major comma errors. One of the major comma errors is run-on sentences, and another one is going to be putting them at the beginning of introductory phases. So we're just going to very quickly go through some things that should just be review for you guys. So obviously a sentence is a complete thought. It has a subject and a verb, and it tells who or what the sentence is about. It tells what happened. It has a capital, and it has a punctuation mark. Right, so the Steelers are going to the Super Bowl this year. The Steelers is your subject, are going is your verb, right? And then Mrs. Jones caught her daughter trying to steal a cookie. Mrs. Jones is the subject, caught is her verb. A fragment, which there were a few of these, but not as many, is when it does not express a complete thought. Most students who made this error, it belonged with the sentence before, and you just put a period in the wrong place, and then the second part of your sentence became a fragment because you didn't include it all together in one sentence. But a fragment doesn't complete it doesn't complete a thought. One thing that I like to tell students is just start at the beginning, stop at the end, and just say that to someone. It doesn't make sense. So for example, I can say, he was going to the game, and you'd be like, cool, hope he has a good time. But if I walked up to you and said, to the game, you're going to look at me and say, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know what you mean. So you need to have a subject and a verb. That sentence or that phrase is a prep phrase, was missing both things. So obviously fixing a fragment, you might need to add a subject, you might need to add a verb, or you might need to just add something to the end. So for example, if you had a dependent clause, something like, since we didn't have any tickets, that's not a complete sentence, right? I could walk up to you and say, hey, since we didn't have any tickets. You're going to look at me and say, well, what happened since you didn't have any tickets? Okay, so that since right there, even though you have a subject and a verb, you have a we, that's your subject, didn't have, that's your verb, that since makes it an incomplete thought. So that's what makes something a dependent clause. It has a subject and a verb, but it's an incomplete thought. In that case, you would have to add a whole nother sentence afterwards. So since we didn't have any tickets, we didn't go to the play, right? So there needs to be a subject and a verb, but it also needs to express a complete thought. Here's where we ran into the most of our errors with our commas. This one and the next couple slides after it about commas. So run-on sentences is when you have two complete thoughts and they're smooshed together with no comma, or they are smooshed together with only a comma. So I'm going to show you both. This is a fused sentence with no comma. Grandma still rides her motorcycle, her poodle balances in a basket on the handlebars. So obviously there are two thoughts here. We have grandma still rides her motorcycle is one thought. Her poodle balances in a basket on the handlebars is another. There's no comma in either one, and really this should have a comma and a fanboy or a semicolon or a period. This one is still a fused sentence. You have an and, which is a conjunction there, but there's no comma, so this is still called a fused sentence. So this is how we fix it. We do comma and, like I just said, grandma still rides her motorcycle and her poodle balances in the basket on the handlebars. Or you do a semicolon, grandma still rides her motorcycle, semicolon, her poodle balances in a basket on the handlebars. Or you could just put a period there and start a new sentence. That's fine too. So those are three ways to fix run-on sentences. Comma splice is when you do that exact same thing except you smoosh them together with only a comma. Remember, a comma is not strong enough to keep two separate sentences apart. The dishwasher is broken, comma, now I have to wash the dishes by hand, period. That's two complete sentences. So you need to add a dot here, make that a semicolon, or add a fanboy, just like I showed you in that last slide. So we have the dishwasher is broken, comma, so now I have to wash the dishes by hand. Or the dishwasher is broken, semicolon, now I have to wash the dishes by hand. Or the dishwasher is broken, period. Now I have to wash the dishes by hand. Perfect. And then this is the other big place that I saw comma errors, is that you need commas to set off introductory phrases. And that just means when you have a group of a phrase, usually a prep phrase at the beginning of your sentence, you need a comma after that before you move on to the rest of your information. And I gave you some examples here. For example, the story has supernatural beings. There should be a comma after for example. This is an introductory phrase. In the text, comma, supernatural beings exist. According to the story, comma, supernatural beings made the earth. So you need commas here whenever you have one of those introductory phrases at the beginning of your sentence. This was probably the most common comma error that I saw throughout. So when you look at your feedback from your myth analysis, if you have that yet, and it says comma errors, this is probably one of the reasons why. Okay. Another thing that I saw that you need to also be careful when you write your origin myth, your origin myths need to be in third person, because all of the myths that we read were also in third person, right? We were like some godlike being watching over everything that's happening, and we just describe what's happening. So it's not happening to us, it's not happening to you, it's happening to those people over there, him, the sky spirit, the grizzlies, them over there. So you guys have the same problem in a formal essay. A lot of you, not a lot of you, but a handful of you used I, you, we, us in your formal essay, and you should never put me or yourself in a formal paper. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples from the text that I saw. In When Grizzlies Walked Upright, we see an example of supernatural beings. Or based on this evidence, you can tell that supernatural beings are in the story. So we have we and you being inserted into our story, and we don't want that. So the next slide is going to show you how we're going to fix it. So you could say, in When Grizzlies Walked Upright, supernatural beings played a role in the story. So you just flip the sentence around. If you wanted to keep it the same way, you could say, based on this evidence, the reader can tell that supernatural beings are in the story. So you have a reader, but it's not yourself and it's not me. You're just saying there's an outside person who's reading the text, and this is what they're going to notice. All right, folks. So that's all the major stuff from our story, our myth paragraphs that you guys wrote before. I wanted you guys to look at this stuff so you didn't make the same mistakes when you go to write your origin myths. When you go through next and watch and do the revision process, keep these things in mind, because those are the things that I'm going to have you looking for as you go through.